Baby. Okay, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
And we're with our producer today, so we might be back on Facebook Live here in a moment. So I'm going to be
Oh, he's
kind of,
looking handsome, and your mustache is looking great. And
oh, mine or Tony's?
I
well,
got
Connie's mustache is coming in, but yours is
yours is looking
outrageous.
nice, John. Yeah, looking
Yeah.
I wanted to wear a fancy mustache today because today is a really important week, not only for America, but for me. And so, if you don't mind, we'll just get started with the show on that. We have seen announcement after event after crazy thing this week that I don't know if we've ever seen something like this before. And of course, I'm talking about the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight tonight.
Right.
And if you think about it, I don't think Jake Paul had any idea how fast that slap could be. But did you see it, Professor?
No, I didn't see it. I heard about the slap. I saw the headline this morning, but
No, but it was really quick. And I think this is really important news for several reasons. Why? Do you remember how old Mike Tyson is?
oh, he's got. If I'm 50, he's got to be almost 60, right?
He's 58. He's my
Yeah.
age. And so I'm gonna take off my shirt and wear that
Oh,
he had like a
underwear.
well, Versace underwear. It was nice. So I'm gonna go buy a pair of fancy underwear, and then I'm gonna do a my body versus his body, just to
Right.
show what a normal 58-year-old should look like.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not only that. Did you see the his answer to the 14-year-old interviewer?
Yeah, that I did see. Yeah, I thought it was
How many
great.
views does she have? How many followers on her YouTube channel does she have?
I, I don't know,
I think
but
it's 1.8 million people. She is a
yeah.
really famous 14-year-old. And did you see his answer?
Yeah, that was the part I thought was great. Yeah.
What'd you like about it? Because remember, you're the history professor. What'd you like about it?
Well, Mike Tyson, obviously a boxer with a troubled past and a lot of ups and downs, but I think there are certain people who are kind of I don't know what you call them, seekers, you know, and uh, and you can tell that Mike Tyson is one of those people who is. I mean, I'm not gonna say he's a philosopher, but he's someone who never stops thinking about his own life, and so instead of giving you know, he doesn't give a canned response.
Oh, the opposite of a canned
Yeah,
response.
it to a question. He actually thought about the question and then gave the answer that he thought was the answer to her question. And of course, that's far more compelling than some fraud giving well, it's all about teamwork answer or something.
Right. But his answer was no, it's all I hope nothing. I'm gonna die and I'm gonna be dust. And it would be the most egotistical thing in the world for people wanting to remember me. No,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be dead. I'm gonna be dust, nothing. There is no legacy. To a
Yeah.
14-year-old girl.
Well, it reminded me of this. I don't know if it's a common Jewish expression, but I've heard Jewish people say this, but that you die twice. The first time you die is when you actually die. And then the second time you die is when everyone forgets you, when your memory dies. And but it's true. I mean, it's one of the things that I think uh, not exposing more people to a regular religious upbringing that you miss out on because if you grow up just in old-fashioned mainline religion of almost any kind, you grapple with eternal questions every week.
Mm.
And but if your entire life is filled with distraction and an absence of that, then it can seem shocking when you stumble across someone who is grappling with these kinds of eternal questions. Because, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but George W. Bush gave a similar answer when he was asked about history, and everybody
Oh,
made fun of him at the time. But George Bush said history will all be dead. Like, and I'm sure Jake can find. Oh, Jake already found
no
the
memory on
quote.
that.
They say you die twice: once when you stop breathing, and a second time a bit later on when somebody says your name on earth for the last time.
And
But
what's the source of that? At least the one he picked up on?
Jake, where'd that come from? That quote?
While he's looking that
He's
up,
looking at the George Bush quote now.
yeah, while he's looking that up,
Banksy.
Jay,
I don't know about Banksy.
yeah, neither do I.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough that you brought that up, Professor, when I think you remember, you've met him once or twice, full bird Colonel Chaplain, um, Air Force Phil Miller,
Mhm.
a friend of mine, and he comments, and I think he's been on a conversation or two with us over the time. He posted it, and the source of his was an American Indian tribal leader. The same exact quote. And so I thought that was really interesting that that's his kind of reaction on my posting of this event. So let me. So we agree this is a historic week because of the big fight tonight, right?
I don't know about that. There's always
He's
somebody
38
fighting.
years old and he's fighting a YouTube star. I mean, if that's not so equivalent to what's going on in the presidential appointments, I don't know what else is.
I
He's
I
a
don't know.
58-year-old boxer fighting a YouTube star.
I mean, if I was trying to write a clever article for a blog or something, I'm sure I could,
Well, think on it because I'm going to after this
yeah, I could
show.
twist this into the, this is a metaphor for our politics right now, the politics of the spectacle and the chaos and the manufactured outrage over each part of it. And yeah,
Right. It's a good
yeah,
story.
yeah, I'm
So,
sure. And it's a kind of story that AI can write for us in the future.
exactly. So, the other big news this week that I just think is personally very rewarding is how old am I again, Professor? See how short term
58.
58. And how old is oh, well, actually, the age doesn't matter on this. But let me give you a couple disparate pieces of information. Tonight, there's a $327 million lotto thing or lottery. I don't play, but in Colorado. So that's pretty good. Maybe it's a multi state. I don't know. I just saw that headline and went, yeah, maybe it's worth a couple bucks again. I do that every like 3 years. That used to be the budget of the Arapahoe County government when I was elected 30 years ago, 96. So 28 years ago. And so I occurred to me that since I have military experience, I was a company commander and a captain, and I ran a huge budget as a commissioner. We didn't have a county administrator or a county manager. The commissioners ran the county, the five of us. And then also founded a city, and I have 2 degrees, and I have some other relevant work experience. I could be the Secretary of Defense.
Sure.
I know
Sounds
I
good.
have, but aren't I as qualified? I just gave you part of my bona fides. All right. Isn't that pretty impressive what I've done in my life? Can't I be I'm going to raise my bar.
I don't know if you could be Secretary of Defense. Yeah, well, obviously, yeah. In today's, yeah, sure.
Why
I think
not?
I think I would rather have you, or I
Hey,
don't know.
thank
Well,
you.
I don't know. That's not necessarily true. Because who do you nominate for the Secretary of Defense? Was that the
The Fox News commentator.
Yeah, but you happen to pick the one guy who I can semi defend. Um,
Fine. Semi defend it versus my background. I have my bar too low. I could either
well,
fight Mike Tyson.
he
I could either fight a
in
YouTube
addition
star
to
or
being
be
a
Secretary of
television
Defense.
in addition to being a television host, he is someone who has participated at a very high level, at least as an intellectual, as a real intellectual, writing for journals about things like um, the large questions of how to deploy the U.S. military. So he's not simply an empty suit and a TV anchor. Now, that doesn't mean I necessarily endorse his views, but I do think that it's unfair to categorize him
Like
as
Tulsi Gabbard.
someone who was not recognized as a voice in the room. He's a voice in the room. He's someone who debated these issues at a very high level before he ever became
There's
oh, I'm sorry, not Pete Hegseth, not that guy. So, I was thinking of somebody else. Sorry.
so Professor, there's 335 million. I can't remember quite how many of us there are in the country. Out of all the major CEOs and all the major professional diplomatic corps and all the major generals and retired generals and all the former cabinet members and all the governors and senators and there's a bunch of us, and there's a bunch with relevant experience, probably in the thousands, right? Would you put him in the top 10?
No, no, no. Well, and I have to be honest. I was thinking of a different guy. Jake just put his name up, so I was thinking of someone else. I was thinking of that Eldridge Colby, I think.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't matter because I
Well,
was
but
thinking of someone
the
else.
guy appointed the Fox News host. Are we talking about the same
Yeah,
guy?
yeah. No, I don't know enough about that guy to comment. Sorry.
Well, but he was like a captain or maybe a major in the National Guard. That's what I was.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've been in
No.
embassies around the world. I've done work in Eastern Europe and Central America. Maybe I should be Secretary of State.
Yeah, I was thinking of Eldridge Colby. Sorry. I was not thinking of Pete Hegseth. Uh, sorry. No, I can't. I just won't comment on it because I don't know enough. But I will say that yes, you are eminently well qualified for any level of government.
And
Uh,
and a pro boxer. I could fight a YouTube star.
you probably could fight him. You could get in the ring and bring your hands up.
And all we can do is figure
Uh,
out how to promote right, because apparently that's all that matters in the world. So let me tie this together. You're the history professor, and we've already determined that the 14-year-old YouTube star that has 1.4 million followers is a 14-year-old who gets to interview Mike Tyson and get a really insightful, interesting quote. Are you telling me, Mr. Professor, history professor, that some of the greatest historical works of our understanding of human nature and what happened thousands of years ago weren't ego driven, self ridden stories about their life? Isn't one of the most common historical ways we think of the world by the person who wrote it in their own words or the letters they drafted to friends? Isn't that just pure ego driven? Me. The opposite of Tyson. They do have history and legacy. We talk about, I'm talking about Herod or Herodotus, I guess, or I'm trying to remember back to my college political science days. I'm talking about the Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, the people penned their word. Isn't this wonderful that people take their time to tell us their thoughts of the world?
I guess I can't ascribe every motive to everybody who's ever put pen to
As
paper.
a historian, it's a good thing, isn't it, that people took the time out of their day to write down their notes about what was going on during the war or their thoughts on the crisis.
Well, it's all history is all we have, so there is no alternative.
Well, wait. When did we determine that? Well, what is history anyway? I mean, that's the topic of the show. What is history? Who's the first historian?
Either depending on your uh, fandom, it's either Herodotus or Thucydides.
Okay.
So
And that what
um,
year is that? Like 3200 BC or something? No, it's not that old.
yeah, I
Uh,
want to say it was like and now you're going to make me look like an idiot. I want to say it was around 600 BC.
yeah,
This is
something
the
like that
thing.
makes sense.
So the
But
thing that Jake could look up.
So when was the first written text to our memory? I looked this up, so I can stump you again.
Well,
First
I know.
major written text.
Well, the first writing came about as a result of commerce. I do remember this from when so if you think about it, the first need for writing came with social complexity. So if you are somebody who is selling grain to someone who you know personally, what you can do is say, you know me, you trust me, there's this much grain in this sack, and I'm handing it to you. But once your society grows to sufficient complexity where you're selling grain to someone who you do not know,
It's so
that,
funny. I actually learned this in school at some point. This rings a
oh,
bell.
did you? Okay. So you need to create some sort of a mark that verifies I am this person. I certify that at this time there was a certain amount of grain in this bag, and that becomes a mark with meaning, which is the first writing. So what we're talking about is, writing is something that is created in order to communicate across time and distance with people who you do not know.
Lovely.
And the human brain is not wired for reading. Hardwired, at least. We're hardwired for language, but not for reading and writing.
And
But
probably
what
even more accurately storytelling, right?
Yes, but language, we can babies can understand what their moms say, and we can communicate verbally, and that's a part of our brain. But in order to read and write, we essentially have to wire different parts of our brain together.
Hmm.
And what those parts are memory and storytelling. So when I say um, um, that history is sort of all we have, is that our memories are nothing but stories. Our memories are not memories. We remember stories, not things. So we only remember uh, stories. That's the only way we can even process information. So when we say that the role of a historian is to put together information and turn it into a story, what we're really saying is we're packaging information up about things that happened in the past, and we're putting it in a form that only a human in the only form that a human being can understand.
Right.
Um,
So that kind of interests us. We've done almost, I think, probably 100 shows on this over 3 or 4 years now. So it interests two people plus Jake, and then Tony and Bar. Okay, and then there's a couple dozen, maybe even a couple hundred people that have been engaged with us over the last couple of years. So a couple hundred people care about this. Does
oh
anyone?
yeah, a lot of dentists and bank presidents. You know.
Fair enough. Does anyone need to know this in order for their job or to be a good parent or to be a good neighbor? Does anyone need to know what you just described, or is it kind of intuitive that people remember stories from their own just life's experience? Do they need to know history?
Boy, depends on what you mean by good. You know, I hate to judge somebody else's parenting. You can certainly be a kind and loving parent and without knowing anything about,
Parenting.
the Civil War. But I think that if you want to say like a good parent in modern life of somebody who has to go out into a complex world, I think it would make you a better parent because it would give you context, which you sent that video.
Slow us down and make us more arrogant. Can't we just solve the problem right in front of us when we need to solve the problem? Can't we just go to the YouTube channel that shows us how to fix or think through anything?
No, and this is something actually came up in one of my classes. One of my students asked this as a question last week, but uh, what's missing in life, history is not the series of unrelated facts that you can access on the internet, because at any point in your life you can go look up an individual fact. uh, I said the wrong century for Herodotus and Thucydides.
We're pretty
uh,
close though.
yeah, 425 BC, right? But and I didn't get the Bush quote exactly right. But what I told my students actually in one of my classes yesterday, uh, was that what I'm telling you are the ideas and the stories, the big context, so that you know what to do with this information. Because the easiest way to tell a lie, and all lies are sort of predicated not on not necessarily on falsehoods, but the most effective lies are based on the truth out of context, so that when you fact check it, you the individual facts are correct, but you've, in the words of Coolidge, distorted their relations. uh, and I still like Coolidge's definition of how we become easier victims for propagandists. It's from his essay Business. Well, it's called Business in the Free Press, because he did a fantastic job of explaining um, that the most effective propagandists are people who use the truth in order to distort the relationship between true facts in order to lead you to a false conclusion. And because we live in a complicated society, we must rely on specialists in order to get by in society.
So that's simply not true, Professor. And I've got to bring up RFK Jr. in this matter. We don't need
Okay.
any expertise. We can have partial truths and then reach some conclusion that sometimes is actually pretty good. Sometimes it's rational, and often it's crazy. As I think it was Lindsey Graham that said, "Batshit crazy." Uh, or are you a supporter and a friend, an ally of RFK Jr.'s?
No, I am none of those things.
I mean, he might be a nice guy. I'm not
But
talking.
but there was an interesting article in the Free Press today about he is bringing up a good question, which is where did autism come from? And we have no answer. You know, like there were 0 reported cases of autism of people his age.
So,
You
so if
know,
I can
that's a
think of
good
an
question.
occasional good question, then I could be in charge of anything?
No, obviously not. No, that's insane.
Yes, he can. He's just got appointed.
Yeah, but well, he didn't. He was nominated.
Nominated.
Let's see where it goes. Uh,
So you must admit, Professor, this. So all my liberal friends, I love that you posted this story from Hiram, and I can't remember his brother's name, Hiram and
Harlan, yeah.
Harlan Lewis brothers, the myth of the left and right. Great storytelling. I listened to the hour-long presentation last night. It was just awesome. Um, but it seems like America is in this same mess we're talking about. That that we just jump to conclusions, and if you're a Democrat, you're just madder than hell and scared at hell, and everything is a mess, and the country's done. And if you're a Republican, you're quietly gloating, or maybe gloating, depending on who you're talking to. And then we have this crazy week of appointments going on, and we all just think this is, everybody just goes to their respective corners. And maybe the Lewis brothers and you and I'm trying to get us in good company, are trying to think about things in a different way. Does
Yeah.
that so who's the madmen? The Lewis brothers and you and I and Jake and Barton? I mean, or is the country gone mad? Is the world gone mad?
Well, you sent this video to us that you wanted us to watch of some
Did you watch
psychologist. Yeah, I watched it and I thought this man has exactly the wrong answer.
it? Yeah.
He is as wrong as you could possibly be.
Describe
Because,
it a little bit from your, because I'm not an expert on the video. I
well,
just
from my perspective, what I heard him say is that people who confront reality are unhappy, which at first glance I would just say is the exact opposite of what I've always heard the
he's a
role of
psychologist
therapist.
though. He's
Pardon?
a, he's a psychologist.
Yeah, but I think what he's trying to do is appeal to, and well, let me defend him for a second. I think I think in what is sort of top line is wrong, but I think a lot of people already believe that the world is a very messed up place. So he's trying to reach them where they are and then get them where they need to be, which
Oh,
is
that's generous. That's pretty generous.
I'm just saying at my most generous. If I think that he doesn't really believe what he's saying, but he knows that other people do, he could be trying to reach an audience of people who believe that the world is a terrible place and get them to,
That's insightful. Good job, Professor. I wanted to have done that. That good
get
job.
them into therapy. So
Yeah.
if that's what he's doing, great. It's not what I would do because I think that it's better to tell a small truth in a way that will appeal to a broad audience in service of a large truth rather than tell a big lie in service to the truth, which is, I think, what he did. Because the goal of therapy is supposed to be to get you to recognize reality on reality's terms and to be able to contextualize what's happening in your life. Because it is correct that in the crisis of modernity is that we could all become overwhelmed with information that would distort our relationship with reality, because we could go out and seek nothing but good news, and then we could convince ourselves that everything is good, or we could seek out nothing but bad news and convince ourselves that everything is bad. But what is true is that every single millisecond in this world, there are more good things and more bad things happening than any human being could contemplate in a million lifetimes. We
Sure.
we we can't understand that much of the world. You are asking something of your brain that it cannot do. So what we need are you need to cultivate a beautiful mind. You need to cultivate a and you need to be an editor and a filter
Are
in
you sure
order.
you're not outside of your expertise of history? It sounds like you're a sociologist now.
Well, I'm definitely not a sociologist. I'm I always say that all of social science is just repeating what Lincoln tried to teach us. So I'm usually just repeating Lincoln here.
And we
Uh,
just lost our whole social scientist.
I know, I'm sorry, but it's I always say it's great that eventually people learned that Lincoln was right, but um, I'm not saying anything other than what Lincoln said in his fragment on Constitution and Union, sometimes known as the Apple of Gold document, which is the only way to lead a worthwhile life is to lead a life where you confront reality, where the only thing that this principle of equality for all is the principle that clears the path for all. But what in it, but if you truly understand what he means by equality for all, what he's saying is you must want a world um, of unearned privilege for everybody so that your life will have a depth and a richness to it, and uh, you will have you can earn you know because there's no shortcut to happiness outside of that. Another way I explain this to my students, and forgive me if I've ever used this example before, but I remember waking up one morning and I woke up and I was in and I was feeling against my skin the sheets that I had chosen, on the mattress pad that I had chosen, on the mattress I had chosen, on the bed I had chosen, with the stereo system that I had chosen. And I had the ability to call up any music that I wanted through this premium sound system. And the climate control was adjusted exactly to my temperature preference. And I was in an addition to a house that I built. And I had a car that I had chosen that I'd always wanted. I had a motorcycle that I had wanted. And so I tell my students, now imagine, what is your idea of paradise? Your idea, you're picking at the island and the drink you'll be, what the temperature will feel like, what the air will feel like. And then the question I have for you is like, what do you do the next day? What do you do after you have everything you say you've ever wanted? Well, now what? And what Coolidge and Lincoln, I think, were the two best people at explaining this. Maybe TR to a lesser extent, but I really think that Coolidge and Lincoln really understood this. Is that work, and this is something else Coolidge said: work is not a curse; it is a prerogative of intelligence. It is. Don't run away from it as if it's something that makes you miserable. It's actually one of the elements of happiness. Just like no, you jog. I swim sometimes, a lot lately. My body's falling apart, so getting old. But
You're 58 and trying to fight a YouTube star.
But if you think about like what it is that actually makes us happy at the end of the day, what made you happy when you were a kid was when you had played so hard all day that you were exhausted, and that you had read a book and you had stared at the sky and you'd been a little bit bored, but at the end of the day, your head hit the pillow and you were passed out. You know, uh, it, all of these things that we consider to be inconveniences, the times when our friends annoy us, but we're still friends, the work that takes place at work, where it's actual work that you don't want to do, the exercise when you don't feel like doing it. Um, all of these things are not, misery. They're all the things that actually a human being must do in order to be happy. And getting everything that you want and laying in bed is misery. you know, now picture, uh, you know, you're sitting on the beach with a drink in your hand, day 362. you know, and then somebody's saying, no, 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 this is what you picked, right?
Hot, still sandy. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You're like, now I would say the only person who seems to have been immune to this was my father with sailing. He never quite got his fill of sailing. He sailed every time he could, and it made him happy. And when he no longer could, he was sad. But and
In good company with Jimmy Buffett, who, although did it as a billionaire, it makes it a little easier.
yeah, yeah. Or Hiram Lewis and I and motorcycles, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Because
Professor,
that's what Hiram and I really talk about more than anything having to do with politics or religion or God or anything else. We talk mostly about motorcycles.
I love that. And I liked his brother too. It was a really good show.
Yeah, and his brother, his whole family are amazing. Like they're just like, I got to meet some of their extended family too. They're just some of the best people you'd ever want to know. I really do love the Lewis brothers. They're great people.
So, Professor, I've got one more thread to weave into this because I want you to bring back, well, two things. I'll tell you my conclusions, but you fix them for me. In angst, I don't have angst actually. I have so much curiosity with the presidential appointments of this last week that most of my friends are getting mad or throwing dirt or laughing or doing all the meme stuff, and I get it. They're normal people, and I have some tendency to laugh and scorn as well, so I get it. Mine has been deeper that I think there's a real chance. I don't know if it will happen, but there's a real chance that we'll finally have the destruction of the Republican Party over this. And the reason for it is because some of these policies, now let me give you a quick analogy. I gave a speech, I've mentioned this before to past conversation. I gave a speech to 100 libertarians a few years back. And as a good public speaker does, I showed up and bought a beer and I walked around and said hi to everybody who was there. They were there, all having a beer and they were there way early. And I said, well, how long have you been a libertarian and what makes you a libertarian? And almost to a T, they said, oh, we're not a libertarian, we're an anarchist. And went, I'm glad I showed up early and asked the questions. These aren't libertarians, they're anarchists. So if you take RFK Jr. and if you take Department of Defense and the Attorney General appointments and let's see, the National Guardsman, female former Congressman,
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard, you take those four. And by the way, there's some pretty good appointments too, but you take those four and it seems to me that that is not a conservative philosophy. That is not a cohesive thought process. So here's what I've thought. Instead of just complaining, like I want to do occasionally, I figured it's important to go to basics and figure out what I believe in and fight for that. And say, instead of I'm against this appointment, yeah, so will you and a bunch of other people. I'd say I'm for this.
Right.
And so I went back a little bit in history. I'm for freedom. You know that. Well, what does that mean? It's complex, but I'm for freedom. That's one of my core philosophies. By the way, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I'm basically believe that most people, most of the time, try to do the right thing. It's kind of the opposite if you're a sinner in a sinner's world. I kind of think most people try most of the time to do the right thing. Otherwise, I'd be a Democrat. I'd want to regulate everything. If I thought everybody,
Well, we need more Eisenhower in our lives,
what
right?
did Eisenhower tie that in?
Well, two things. First of all, it was Eisenhower when he was president who argued that the problem with the way many intellectuals described conservatism in the 1950s is they were only against things. And so he tried to popularize this book by Arthur Larson called What We Are For, which was and he made this guy an author or he was more prominent than he would have ever been if Eisenhower hadn't been waving this book around saying let's talk about what we are for rather than what we are against. But oh, go ahead.
No, but Reagan did that same thing. He's the one that inspired me. He was for all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
Not just cutting the government and not just being a mean guy. I mean, I know people think he's a cutter and a mean guy. No, he was for all sorts of things.
But there was something else that you brought up that I wanted to agree with you on. What else did you say midstream there? It was something. There's another Eisenhower. Another question that Eisenhower had answered. Yeah, I lost it. I don't know.
And
Move on.
I
Yeah.
distracted you. So let me go to the final thought I have. It's important for me to outline some things that I'm in favor of. I just kind of want to do it for my own intellectual experience. I'm for freedom. I basically believe in most people. Now, I think a lot of people screw up all the time, and yes, we need some laws so when they screw up and hurt people and
Oh, I remembered it. That's what it was. So Eisenhower, sharing with Lincoln and Hamilton, really had this theory of leadership. And it's actually, remember what I said about that guy who was sort of, talking about psychology? So I was actually remembering Eisenhower there.
oh,
So what Eisenhower believed was that the only way you could actually achieve social change is to tell a small truth in service of a big truth in such a way to access what Lincoln called the better angels of our nature, meaning that every single human being has within them a capacity for good and a capacity for evil. So, what you need to do is you need to access the good part of them, find the thing that you agree about, get them to acknowledge the good version of themselves, and then build upon that.
isn't that great? Oh, I love that.
And then get them and it's the way that he did it specifically in civil rights was he would, if you go back and look at all of his statements on civil rights, he always said he would start talking about freedom in very general terms in World War II, which everybody knew that the Nazis were the bad guys, right? And we're all against the bad guys. But then he would talk about like, we're all patriotic Americans, of course, and then he would always say that, and of course we're all against discrimination, and he would always couple, we would never discriminate against things that, as in Americans we consider inconsequential, like race and religion. He never just put race. He always said race and religion, because even in the deepest South, they already respected freedom of religion. So what he was trying to do was get everybody who was gettable. You know, anybody who was not openly motivated by their hatreds. You could anybody who didn't think of themselves as a bad person who, I'm inflicting my pain on the world and thus I must, be a racist forever. You can build a new identity by saying, oh, you're somebody who already believes in freedom. You believe in freedom of religion, and of course you would never, want to go over and tell some, you're a Baptist and they're an Episcopalian, and you would never want them telling you how to, worship God. And yeah, of course not, right? Yeah. So of course we don't have a problem with letting other people live their lives without being discriminated against. Oh yeah, of course, every decent person, right? And we're all decent people here. Yeah, of course, we're all decent people here. So that the only people you're eliminating are the people who are so motivated by their hatreds that they are essentially ungettable. But you're trying to get everybody else, and you're built. But I think the difference between Eisenhower and your psychology video that you shared is that Eisenhower, and I'd say the great ones, Eisenhower, Lincoln, they wanted to,
Reagan.
yeah,
I
I
know
just,
they're not as good as Lincoln, but
yeah, you want to. I think Reagan is an important lesson for something else, but I sort of put Eisenhower and Lincoln in a separate category when it comes to this specific thing. But I think you're right. He does probably belong in that bucket if we made the bucket a little bigger. Um,
fair
but
enough.
uh, what you want to do is you want to use a small truth that we can all agree on that accesses the good part of someone in order to get them to take the next step towards a larger truth. And we should never fear the truth. That's something else that Coolidge was particularly good on, is that if we believe that our founding fathers have actually got this right, that the best way to live in peace with one another is to protect many values and let them, sort of let these many values compete with one another peacefully, and that will lead to the best result. That what we need to do, we should never fear the truth in context. We should always be trying to lead people, and which means that when somebody says something that is true out of context, that what we need to say, you're right, it's true, it's just out of context. But that's the sort of teaching part that real statesmen can engage in.
I'm just thrilled that you went down this line of thought. I still haven't gotten to my main
Oh,
thrust.
sorry. Let me
Not a
just, I want to read the full Coolidge quote for you right now, because now that I see it, Jake put it in our show notes here, and it's actually more spectacular than I remembered. Work is not a curse. It is the prerogative of intelligence, the only means to manhood and the measure of civilization. Savages do not work. The growth of a sentiment that despises work is an appeal from civilization to barbarism. That's better than I remembered it. Yeah.
That's great stuff. Yeah, I'm going to have to read more on Coolidge. So speaking of reading, you have a nice little treatise, and I guess it's unfair to call a Facebook post a treatise, but it really is kind of withstanding the test of time. And you have a bunch of them, but the one I'm referring today is on race relations. And it says, hey, if you want to talk race, that's fine. But I've heard way too many people talk about race without having any idea what they're talking about. And you've got to read the following, I don't know, 8 original texts and the following 6 books. But if you have to boil it down to 3 books and 5 original documents, and it will take like 2 weeks. But why don't you read those before you talk about all this other stuff? Because you'll be a better person. It will be more meaningful. It will be in context, because you can read all the other. I mean, I summarize it in an ineloquent way. It is really worth reading too. So I'll post that again. I posted it maybe 4 or 5 times on my wall because it's so important. And by the way, no one reads it, even in the race relation group. How many of those original books do you think I've read, Professor? You say there was 8. I'm not sure.
I
How many have
I
I
know
read?
you read 1,
I've
maybe
read
2. 3, okay.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm just thrilled with all 3. I think they've actually changed my perspective on the founding
Right.
of our nation.
Well, I mean, you mentioned something about education, and I didn't stop you to correct it, but like the end result of all education is humility. Like, it doesn't make you more arrogant, it makes you more humble. Because the more books you read, the more the more you know you do not know.
Yeah.
And it slows you down because you're getting that context. The word for someone who knows a little bit and is dangerous and an idiot is a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's literally what the word means, to be sophomoric. And
Yeah.
having just a little bit of knowledge, I mean, you know the big word and you know one thing, but you don't know how to put that information into context. Congratulations, you're a sophomore, which should mean you're on your path to learning more, but it doesn't mean you should be in charge. Like we should be encouraging you, but you don't get to formulate policy when you're 20 or when you're 15.
Except in the year
Yeah,
2024. Sorry. But
yeah,
in the year
exactly.
2024, apparently we can. So thank you for writing that on race and race relations. It was really an intriguing commentary, and it's a good starting place for anybody. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Here is your next task. Not today, but I'm planting a seed. I looked up the first one. I don't know if you were referring to of Pish, I think it was, or Kish. It was Kish, the earliest stone tablets in the Sumeria found in the Temple of Nippur in Kish, which is now in Iraq, in 3200 BC. Does
Wow.
anyone need to know that?
Well,
And it's why.
I think what you need to know is what I told you, which is I think it's important to understand the basics of how your brain works.
Well, but do you
And
need to know those facts about the earliest Sumerian stone tablets, 3200 BC for
well,
agriculture?
I guess I've never been a dates kind of a guy, especially I try to get this stuff accurate in my area of expertise, but I've you know did it does it matter if it was 3200 BC or
Yeah, but
3100
just the
BC?
concept of it. Is that important to know it went a couple thousand years ago they did that? Am I a
Yes.
better carpenter or a janitor or a father or a secretary of defense or attorney general or all the different fields by knowing that?
Yes. You're always a better at whatever you do. I mean, as I'll quote, I don't know if he actually wrote this in a book anywhere, but something Victor Davis Hanson once said, which I don't know if he said it to me in class or if he said it in public, but he said something along the lines once of like, the problem in our society is not that we're all too sensitive, too aware of the past, too he went on for a while, but like the problem, if you look at the bigger problems of society, it's not that we all know too much about the Peloponnesian War, like the, or that we have way too much context for our own lives. Like the problems kind of all derive from the opposite of that. Um, so I always think that when it comes to real learning, well, again, let's get back. I can still keep quoting Coolidge here. Of real education, we cannot have too much.
Even the esoteric Kish tablets from the Sumerian area several thousand years ago.
Yeah, as long as you don't take that little piece of information and then stop learning and try to to blow
Yeah.
that out of proportion and create a new social system and then start putting people in camps for disagreeing with you about it.
I love that. So I've got like 8 more of those, and I want to run it by you because I did an extensive internet research as I want to do before a discussion. I want to prove that I'm an expert, so I want to spend 5 minutes on the internet so I know what questions to ask you. So I
Mhm.
did that, and I researched the 100 most influential books of all time. Because if we're a good citizen, we might want to know some of those books. Out of the top 100, and I didn't write them all down. I thought about doing a spreadsheet because I'd actually like to read some of them before I die. I think I've read 20 or 30 of them. I have another 20 in my house somewhere, so about half of them I own.
That's
Uh,
good.
and so, does that make me a better father or a boxer or a secretary of defense? Beats me. We're going to go through a couple. Ready?
Yeah.
Um, the Iliad and Odyssey by Homer.
Well, never finished either one.
Neither have I.
Uh,
I have them both in my home, and I think they were even assigned in college. I was a philosophy minor. Well, so why do most people actually have kind of heard of those two books and Homer?
I think the most important thing you need to know from Homer is you need to know that your mind can travel across time. That
Yeah,
there's
I love
something really amazing about knowing that people who lived a long time ago, you can understand them. You can and the issues that they bring up and this sort of tragedy and complexity of life. I mean, maybe I should have finished both of them, but I didn't. But I did find myself sitting back in my chair, um, saying, wow, this is actually, and I had the same experience with Herodotus and Thucydides. I don't remember the
it.
specifics of either thing, but like in both cases, I mean, that's why the study of the classics was so mind blowing. I never I never did a field in classics, but because Victor Davis Hanson was at the school at the time, I thought I got to take
Right.
classes with this guy. He's amazing.
Bus drivers and rocket scientists and brain surgeons and nurses and all the imaginable fields should benefit. They should look at some
Yeah,
of them.
yeah.
Can they read the Cliff Notes or whatever the modern version is? Can they just go on the internet and read a little
I
summary?
don't think so. I think that because if you don't read the text, you don't have the connection. So I would say you need that's one of the things that I really got from my I was already down this path because I at Cal Poly I studied under a guy named David Harlan. His real name was Craig. Well, he went by Craig Harlan, but his books are all published under David Craig Harlan. Degradation of American History. And I don't know if you saw this, but I posted pictures of us from my college graduation a few weeks ago because he passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
And he was the one who really got me thinking about in the idea of love and obligation, that that we feel a sense of obligation to the past, and what we want to build on is our love. you know but he's the one who said, if you want to know Lincoln, read Lincoln. uh, and then, so that by the time I was exposed to Hansen a couple years later, I was already primed for this. And then, my training in Ohio. But then the next thing was my exposure to Peter Schramm up at Ashland, because the entire focus at Ashland is primary sources. And you just see it happen over and over and over and over and over and over again, that the thing that changes people's lives is finishing a book and reading the primary sources.
The original book,
Yeah, the original, because that's when you have the connection to the past. When you finish reading, I mean, how many times today have I quoted Business in the Free Press by Calvin Coolidge, right? Like, there's a lot there, and you don't get it until you read it yourself, and you keep reading it until you understand and have a love for it that gives you an obligation to the past and the present and the future, because you realize it gives you a sense of your own humanity.
So asked and answered. I had no idea you'd be that authoritative on the need and necessity to read books. So well done. Jake, are you leaving in a second, or do you have a little more time?
Jake's been on fire, by the way. Anybody who's looking at his show notes today, they've been superb. Thank you, Jake.
Jake, are you with us? Or are you leaving, or have you already left?
No, he's here.
Well, can he talk?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, typing.
Right. Are you going to be with us a couple more minutes?
Yeah, it's my prep period. I'm good until like noon.
Okay, we're going to end in 10, 15 minutes, but I'm not going to skip to you then for a second then, okay? Professor, we got to be brief now. Ready?
Okay.
Next one in the top 100, the Old Testament. Give us 2 lines. Should we be reading that?
Absolutely. And I would say also read Marilyn Robinson's book on Genesis. It has really opened my eyes to the significance of Genesis in a new way. So I would say you absolutely need to read the Old Testament.
A human way, a religious way. Why do we have to read Genesis?
For the same reason. It hits you in different ways. I mean, that's the point, is that I don't have to tell you how you will be changed. You will be changed. You will read it and you will be changed by it.
I'm fascinated by that answer. How about, and I got to go back to college for this. How about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't give that one a maybe. I've never read them, so I don't know.
Read a summary of that. Not read them, but why don't you read a summary of that and go, oh, now I know why John asked that. Do me a favor and just read, I think I know what John's talking about now.
All right.
Because no one's read the Dead Sea Scrolls, but if you say Genesis, if you say the Old Testament's worthy of reading, but not read the Dead Sea Scrolls, wonder why.
Well, I find that stuff interesting. There was a good new translation of the Gospels that blew my mind a couple of years ago, and I think it was just called the Gospels. I'm sorry, Jake. I don't know if I can come up with a better title. I know it had a white cover and it was just called the Gospels, but it was really great because of what the author included, which is all of the the decisions that she had made as a translator, because you could see, here was where this translator made this choice, this translator made this choice, and this is it. The Sarah Rudin Gospels, a new translation. And what I find interesting is it, again, hopefully leads to a little more humility when people start saying, I am extremely authoritative about this one thing out of context, and you just know, let's go back and look at this, because there's a context to how and when this was said and spoken.
Lovely. Professor, we got to go quick now.
Right,
it's my fault. We got to go quick. Number 7 on the list. Odyssey was number 22, by the way. Number 7 on the list. The year I graduated high school. It's one of the most important books right next to I mean, it is huge. 1984 by George Orwell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I think it's a
Yeah.
great book, but really it's one of the most influential books in the history of the world.
I mean, if anything, Orwell is becoming more important, not less important.
Okay, fair enough. I love the book, but I would thought you would like discard it, but thank you. We'll go back to
Yeah,
that.
in fact, and not just Orwell, not just his books, but also his essays have, kind of become more important to me.
Yeah. Well, me too. And fascinating. Didn't think you'd answer that way. War and Peace by Tolstoy, number 15. Really?
Oh, I tried on that one
Oh, me
too.
too. I can't do it.
Well, I remember because Brasino did it, and I was like, "Oh, you're a better man than me." He actually
All
finished
your
it. I was,
friends challenge me. I don't think I can do it. I don't like the style of writing or something.
well, I don't know. I've read some of like I think I've read all the short Russian novels.
Yeah, right.
Like
And a
just
or
because I want the flavor, I want it, because it is such a rich.
Okay, so we agree. We don't have to read War and Peace. Hey,
Uh,
here, Jake, we finally got to you. This is the reason I want to make sure you hadn't left yet. The number 16 of the most influential books in the world, which cracks me up because there's also other cultures besides English language. Guess what number 16 is, Jake? And I know you don't even like it. I love it. You don't even like it. Guess what it is?
Is it Lord of the Rings?
It's Lord of the Rings.
uh, I was kind of disappointed by Lord of the Rings,
I
but
love Lord of the Rings. I know Jake hates it. I love Lord of the
I
Rings.
love the
John,
movies.
Lord of the
John,
Rings.
the movies are the greatest movies ever made. We will
It
never, like,
and
there is a finality to the Lord of the Rings movies that is true. We will never get better. The books have really good things in it. They also have Tolkien describing a tree for 3 pages.
love
Yeah,
that.
Okay.
yeah.
I need like a condensed version of Lord of the Rings where they take out all the descriptive fluff. The books are, I mean, I enjoyed the books, but I don't care about the fluff.
Who did
I
that with
would
the
say
Old
that
Testament?
the books made me like the movies more because I realized what a genius he was by how he took those books and turned them into those movies.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's one of the few times, and not my other. Let me just throw in because we're definitely not. But the Coen Brothers version of True Grit was
Mm.
also incredible
Oh,
for
I
that.
need to watch that. I don't think I have then. I love True Grit.
Yeah, the book is one of my. It might be my favorite book. But the Coen Brothers version of True Grit is spot on with the book.
Note to self, I'll look that up. Got to keep moving though.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
oh, but by the way, who was that? You know, Lord of the Rings versus Oh, Jake, you said you wanted to do an abbreviated part and knock out all the stuff that didn't matter.
Yeah.
Didn't like who was that did that with the Old Testament?
That was Jefferson. He did it
Right,
with the Bible and he just kind of kept in like Jesus's sayings, and that was
right.
it.
So we
Yeah.
need a Peterson Lord of the Rings. You've got a bestseller on your hands.
I'm too busy reading Brandon Sanderson right now. I don't have time to edit Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, number 16. Here's a personal favorite of mine. It's a novella, actually. It's not a book. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Love
Yeah,
that.
I read it, but I have no memory of that book.
Oh, it will take you 3 hours, and or
I
maybe.
know, but that's what I mean. I read it at some point in my life in college, and it was
And
one that went in my head and
you
went
don't
out.
here, I'll do a shortcut for you. You don't even have to read it. Just rent or Netflix. Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola.
Sure.
No, not just words or whole pages. He just absconded, changed the setting. It's wonderful. Love
Right.
that. That, by the way, is number 24. Here's one I actually did read, and I read it several times. I love this book in college. It's one of the very few books I actually read in college. Ready?
Yes.
Dante's Inferno or the Divine Comedy is number 24. Is that important for a farmer? Is that important for a retail business owner? Why do they need to read Dante's Inferno?
Well, that's a stretch. I don't know. I don't know if a farmer needs to read Dante's Inferno.
Shoot.
I don't think there'll be a worse person. I think, but maybe there'll be better people. But
Oh, professor, you're so wrong on this. It categorizes the types of sins and what level of hell you'll be in, and
I know.
relations on whether a white lie or a real lie, and whether what kind of it's in a way. I think. Well, I don't want to say it's better than the Bible. I think it's really interesting evaluating sins. I know all sin is equal.
Yeah,
Dante
yeah,
doesn't say so.
yeah. No, I
Okay.
mean, I
I,
liked it. I didn't love it. It's fine.
and Number 29 is the whole Bible, not just the Old Testament. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, one of my favorite little novellas. I love that. Number 29, most important book in the world, really.
Interesting.
I love that book.
Yeah.
Diary of Anne Frank, Diary of a young
Yeah.
Anne Frank.
Yeah.
Never.
That's the only book my kids have. That's the only, if your children read anything in school, that will be the only book they read. I
Oh,
think my
interesting.
kids made it to 8th grade only reading one book, and that was it.
Yeah, I didn't make that one, but I kind of want to read it. Brave New World, Gulliver's Travels, Hamlet by Shakespeare, Animal Farm by Orwell. Those are 64. I only got it through the first 100 books. Professor, most of the books were novella or novels of not romance, but more contemporary, Wuthering Heights and stuff. I hated that book. Anyway, here's your task, and you have
Mhm.
like 10 years to do this. I'd rather you do it in like 6 months, but you have a long time to do this. In order to be a good American citizen, all right, and
Yeah,
who?
yeah. I'm just laughing because Tom Brasino and I did this 20 years ago.
Well, then find it and
When
publish
we
it.
were when we were in grad school and blogging together, we put together our list of books every American should read, and
Good.
Tom
I want to
Brasino.
see it. Have you ever published it?
Yeah, it was, it's funny. It was on our blog. Derek took the
Or
name for his, because we had a group blog, Derek and Tom and I, and it was called Rebunk after um, something that Alonzo Hamby said about history is that it goes in a cycle of bunk, debunk, and rebunk. And so we called our group blog Rebunk, and now that's the name of Derek's Substack.
oh,
Um,
that's right. Oh, I was wondering where I knew that from.
and but back in the day when we were all doing Rebunk together, we put together the list of the books all Americans should read.
So, do you think you have it, or do I have to ask Derek for it?
I bet Tom has it. You never ask Derek and I anything. You have to
All right,
ask
I'll ask
Tom
Tom.
to organize. Yeah, he's the organized one.
Okay, I'll ask Tom. And then I want you to dust it off. I didn't know it was such an easy assignment. So, Professor, to tie
Yeah.
this all together, we really can be anything we want to be, right? A boxer or a secretary of defense, or can we be a pilot or an aerospace engineer?
Yeah, I mean, barring your physical limitations, anybody could be anything. I've always understood that.
Well, but to be an aerospace engineer, we actually have to know stuff, right?
Right. You'd have to learn aerospace engineering in order to be an aerospace
Or a,
engineer.
or a bridge builder. But to be a bunch of stuff, you don't need to know any of these history books we've talked about. You don't need to be a good citizen, do you? Can't you just raise your family and go to church or have a hobby or be a coach and know
Sure.
nothing, not a single one of these books for your entire
Yeah.
life?
I mean, of course, like I know a lot of good people who, I mean, most people I know who are good people, they just kind of live their lives.
Right.
They don't, you know, the, and something I said, I think in our last show is like the guy who's, coaching his kids' youth basketball
Right.
team is probably doing more for this country than someone who's liking and sharing something on a social media.
Two disparate points, and we're going to finish the show or see what the other gentlemen want to say. Two disparate points. I just heard you say you don't need to read any of this and just be a good basketball coach and you're being a better citizen than the average. Right. That's one point out of
We
context.
asked me what's better. What would be, yeah.
Well, but that's one point out of context. And the other
Yeah.
point I heard today is to read one full book in its entirety and in its original form from start to finish, and it will change your life. So, how do I take these two disparate pieces of information and put it into a broader context on how we should be good citizens in presidential campaigns and good citizens in evaluating proposals and cabinet members? How do we, instead of just the tweet, the angry tweet, or the weird meme, how do we learn something? How do we grow? How do we reach our highest potential? How do we better angels? What's your overall recommendation on what you and I should be doing on this show for the next 4 years? Or do we do what a lot of people have said and go, I'm giving up. I don't want to hear any of it. I'm leaving to Europe. I'm moving,
Well,
retiring.
I mean, I had that my one Substack post concluded with my 2 paragraphs of information of suggestions,
Oh, I
and it
thought I read
included
this, but this doesn't ring a bell.
and it was something like I don't know what there was a lot of advice I had in there, and it was like go for a hike, read a book. It was a lot. There was a lot in there.
Well,
But
surprise, show. What's your gut after this hour and a half long conversation? Or hour and 15 minutes. What do you think? What should we do when we see what happens after the fight happens tonight, or what his next appointment? He's going to do another major appointment today. What do we do?
Oh, so here's what I wrote a couple 2 weeks ago. Serve on a city committee, coach a team, go to church, pay for a subscription to the Dispatch and the Free Press, read them, pay for a subscription to a news agency near you who actually covers the state and local government, read the best scholars and intellectuals and nobody else. Stop using social science labels to talk about human beings. Walk, hike in the woods, ride a Triumph Bonneville, eat leafy greens, have real conversations with real human beings. Listen to good music, visit 3 national parks, read good history books written by real historians, hug real people every day, learn what pluralism is, and do everything possible to make sure that every American understands the basics of what the Bill of Rights Institute is teaching you, and read Calvin Coolidge.
Lovely. And I've only done 40% of that.
Yeah.
But those are good pieces of advice. Does that summarize the show? We don't need any more conversations. I mean, one of your recommendations is have good conversations with good people. Well, cool. We're doing.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to read too much into that paragraph. I mean, that was just I sat down and wrote that in 10 seconds.
Sure.
You know, that's Substack is for half thoughts, not for real.
I'm-
If I was working on, I was thinking about this because there's a reason why I've only written one thing, and it's because I sort of told myself a few years ago, like, if I'm going to write something, I want to do it right. I'm going to publish it somewhere. It's going to have to
Today's
stay.
world?
Yeah. And then I use Facebook and
Sure.
Stack for those are half thoughts. You know, like stuff I just want to get down, you know, but a public diary more than
World of tweets and now blue sky anti-tweets.
yeah. But
That's
there's
more.
a difference between when I'm being a scholar, which is when I'm being a real historian, I'm trying to do something that I think will be useful 300 years from now.
Ooh, anti Mike Tyson quote. You're trying to
Yeah.
build.
Well, that will be permanently useful to other scholars, you know, so that if somebody wants to read what I wrote about Madison and property, I did that so that if somebody wants to read about Madison and property, that they can read what I wrote and then look at what Madison wrote and say, okay, yeah, now I understand what Madison meant by property, you know, and I understand it now, and I'll understand. Yeah, and they can build on that and use it in their work, you know.
And you're saying they're both equally valid. The authentic treatise of thoughtfulness, as well as some jot down on Substack or a tweet.
Yeah.
They're both important.
Yeah, because I'm also a human being, you know. I forget things. I say to hug people and I forget to call people, you know. We all stumble through.
I've gone too far. Tony, Bart, Jake, I've jumped around a lot, but Professor Tootle had a lot to tie us in, including his last Substack. What would you like to add or subtract or modify or crank or rant?
I have a question for Tony, actually, if he's ready to answer a question. I just wanted to know what he thought about my answer about that, you know, psychology video. If he thought I was wrong or had a reaction to it.
It's interesting because I've reviewed it a few times while we've been talking. To go back to it, and I think the essence of it maybe came off differently. Like your reflection of that. So
you liked it.
Oh, I liked it. Basically, what I heard, and he restated it a few different ways and tried to, quote somebody, I can't remember who, but the long and short of it being that if you're in contact with reality, right? Reality being what's going on right now, and there isn't a part of you saying this is crazy, man, then something's wrong, right? So his point was, hey, if you feel like depressed and things like that, you may actually be really in contact with reality, and it may not be you that's crazy. It may be this whole thing that's crazy, right? So that was the essence of what he said, which I agreed with, and I'm not sure that that's what you got from it necessarily.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask, because it depends on what you consider reality. Right. I think the context of what he's talking about is the election, you know. But again, he didn't say how you feel about Donald Trump's latest statements. He said reality, and I
Yeah.
was, whoa,
Yeah.
reality's a lot. It's not
Yeah.
just the American election that happened last week, you know.
And I don't know that it was said, and I don't know where the quote came from, John. I don't know that it was said, and I haven't dug in deeper. I think he thinks this way all the time. You know what I mean? Whether we're talking about the election or whether we're talking, and there is some, and I kind of resonate with it mostly because in order for me to stand out, in order for me to critique something, I kind of have to stand outside it and see the insanity of it or see whatever. Do you know what I mean? In order to comment on it, and that's that's a skill that some people don't have. They're in it, right? They can't, you know.
Right.
So
Well, but I know from my limited reading of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
right.
that and if you look at the sort of list of common things that negative distortions that we have that are a form of mental illness that you need to help, that you need to get over, it's that one of the things you do is you filter information in a negative way, you know. And so, but of course, when something bad is happening, that it's not negative filtering.
Yeah.
You are accurately describing or feeling appropriate feelings.
Yeah, well, and maybe the way that I think about it right now in the context of what we're talking about, I'm pretty sure that we were in, you know, when we were in England or whatever, and we're like, this is crazy, man. We're getting the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to establish a whole new colony. I mean, that there had to be a lot of that energy happening, you know, like, and I'm not, I want it to be done in a not so off the, you know, kind of crazy way. I just want it to be, hey, can we agree this is crazy and still have a dialogue? You know, like,
yeah. Well, that was the first paragraph of my Substack was, I'm not going to tell you how to feel.
Yeah.
Because that would be stupid for me. You know, I can't tell
Right.
how to feel. You know, feel however you feel, and then when you're ready to, you know, move
I'd
on.
love to ask Tony that question because Tony, my guess is one of the reasons you're on the show today is because of that link that from that psychologist or psychiatrist I sent. I think you really liked it. I didn't like it at all, by the way. I thought it was pretty bleak. I thought it was pretty what a down way to live by having everything's a horrible thing. And I have a lot of friends like that are just really down. And I mean, it's just there's horrible things that are happening in this community around the world. If you think about those all day long, of course you'd be depressed.
Yeah, but the whole point of therapy and mental health is that you're supposed to feel your feelings and then reconcile them with reality. You know.
Right, and filter it differently. I think that the point that he was making too was, you know, we need to be better at filtering reality. You know, those of us that are like, part of what's been disheartening for me is hearing so many people just like wailing and gnashing teeth. And I'm like, come on. You know, I mean, like, we got to move on. And I don't mean to be like saying, hey, yeah, horrible thing. And every new kind of decision that's being made, they're like, see. And I'm like, I just don't feel that way. I just am like, hey, we got to keep moving forward and doing the things that matter. You know, like a lot of what your Substack said, Stephen, you know, just, you know, take care of like, or what you were saying about if you were a basketball coach, in many ways, you may be doing more for the entire world right now than anybody's doing. What's it helping? You know, complaining about how horrible and miserable, and you know, just all this kind of stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
Good.
Jake, do you have anything to finish this off, or should we let Professor Tootle have a last comment?
I have been a really bad American these last couple of weeks because I have been going and walking at the gym and listening to audiobooks. My screen time on like Twitter and Instagram is way down. And I
Nice.
just see the updates on the TV at the gym while I'm walking on the track. Every time I do a lap, all the TVs in Utah are set to Fox News. So the last couple of days, every time I do a lap, I see a new nominee for Trump on the TV. And then I keep walking, but I really don't care because I'm just reading books and living life right now. I will start caring about them after Trump becomes president on January 20th, and these people can actually do something to my life.
Yeah.
Nice.
Don't borrow trouble. I mean, I remember when COVID hit, I really told people like a lot, get a one of the things I did that I think me and my kids got through COVID pretty much unscathed. And I think a big part of it was I had a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, the paper version, and that was the only news I was consuming. And I was only consuming it once a day, and then I was off screens, pretty much all during COVID, other than when we were, so I was pretty unplugged during those times.
Well, I don't want to finish. Go ahead, Jake.
Well, no. So my screen time because of the election has been really bad the last couple of weeks. So I put in a screen time limit on like Twitter and Facebook, and it's at an hour. And I keep I know the password to give me more time, but I keep telling myself like every day that I don't have to put in my password is a victory. And the last couple of days that I've been listening to books, it's been a victory.
Yeah,
so politics, according to the Lewis brothers, shouldn't be on a spectrum because it does a disservice to everybody. It's just so minimalizes the complexity of the human being and our relationships. I love that premise. And so I don't think it's a spectrum, but I wrote in last week, Jake, that you didn't read because of your limited Facebook time, that there is a cycle of many things. And there really should be a reprieve after the election. I mean, we shouldn't post on this there's a time to campaign, and the time to campaign is before people vote. But after they voted, God, do we have to campaign 365 days every year? No, there should be a break. Thanksgiving's coming up and Christmas is up. And Jake, to your point, once he's president, we can really rip into it again. There's a time and a place. I think there's a famous song written about this.
Yeah, it's also from the Bible, a book that we should all read.
That's right.
But I would also say there's a reason why I couldn't speak authoritatively on Trump's more obscure nominees, and it's because I'm not paying attention yet. I think he's doing the right thing. Like, you want to know when I'm going to pay attention? Like, when there are some hearings and it looks like, first tell me that the nomination hasn't been withdrawn.
Yeah.
Because I think some of these are going to be withdrawn before they ever. So I'm not going to waste my mental energy.
A couple of them need to be withdrawn, or otherwise we are really in for a show.
And I'm telling you this as someone who literally is an expert in American political history, who might have to know this stuff someday. And I'm telling you, dear listener and viewer, if you want my special, you don't have to know this stuff. Like, you don't have to know the name of somebody whose name was floated, who never even got a vote on the Senate floor for a nomination. And if you think I'm wrong, just tell me who the Secretary of State was in 1872.
Oh, well, no one
can't do that. Then relax, everybody.
Jefferson, 1872. No.
Yeah, that's why I picked 1872, because I picked something I didn't know.
Yeah, no one knows that. Yeah. Okay, Professor.
Well, I think it might have been like Hamilton Fish, maybe, but I have some guesses, but I don't know that for sure.
Professor, I really value Seward. We actually should know that. It was the Alaska deal.
Seward was still all right. Yeah.
Isn't that Alaska?
And that would have been, I had like 3 guesses, and I would have.
What was Seward famous for? Isn't it Alaska? What am I confused?
Seward? Oh my gosh, one of the founders of the Republican Party, leaders during the Civil War. Basically, yeah. There's great books on Seward. There was a great biography of Seward that just came out like 3 years ago.
We should know that. Bad example.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not great with dates.
Professor, thank you for your time. Let's look for. I'll publish, or I'll find your 100 most famous books, or whatever you guys did, and we'll review this again, because we've got to do something different. Our current system of citizenship is madness. So let's behave differently somehow. And by my questions, I've given you some ideas of what I'm thinking of.
Oh, was it Hamilton Fish? Did I get it right? I did get it right.
Well, we can't all be professionals.
Internet, how about that?
We can't all be professionals, Professor. All right, gentlemen, thank you for your time, and hope to see you next week, if not sooner.
See you guys. Thank you, Jake. That made my day.